Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to the Riviera International Centre in Torquay for Digital Devon Live. Thank you again for joining us, and we've still got lots more live streams to come to you. At the moment, in the speakers arena, we've got over 150 people currently watching, a whole load of very intelligent people talking about things that I actually have no idea about. Much similar to the next topic, to be honest with you, cybersecurity. Now, there's a topic and a half. Actually, I kind of lie, because there are a few podcasts where cybersecurity comes up, and everyone goes into such detail and such depth and forgets about the businesses of our size, like the SMEs and the micro businesses, for whom it is perhaps even more important, because when it comes down to cybersecurity, the buck stops with you, the business owner. So what better way of approaching it than to get two experts, gentlemen, you're experts, okay? Put your experts hat on. And we've got Richard Henson, the director of, I'm going to say Regola, but we're going to ask him about the name of the company in a few moments, and also Andrew Joy from Nexus. So Richard, tell us about your business, the name, and what you do.
Hi there. It's Regola. You may notice, if you look at the name, there's a line above the E that emphasises that it was actually an Italian name. My wife spent the first 10 years of her life in Italy, so...
Was that with or without you?
That was, yes, a long time before she met me. It means rule. And cybersecurity is all about sticking to the rules. Mm-hmm. As far as technical security is concerned, there are 5 basic rules. And if you look at our logo, it's a pentagon representing each of the 5 rules.
Super duper. And next to you, we've got Andrew, Head of Technical at Nexus. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so good morning. So I'm Andrew, Head of Technical Department at Nexus. So about myself, I look after our service delivery team at Nexus and our project team. So to put a bit of context, I guess, behind that, Nexus, we're an IT company in the Southwest. We've got about 50 employees, the majority of which are IT engineers or, IT trained. And yeah, we provide IT support for organisations, which manage services, if you know what that means, and we provide professional services. So if we have organisations with their own IT team, we'll work with them to deploy solutions that they may not have the time or capability to do.
Excellent, fantastic. Okay then, Richard, first question to you, dear sir. Cybersecurity. Can you please tell us what it is?
Okay, it's about keeping data safe. And what does safe mean? It means basically when the data is being held on some sort of device, or whether it's travelling between devices or travelling sort of through the air or anyway, it is also kept safe. Interestingly, maybe not for everybody, but the German word for safe and the German word for secure is exactly the same. Can't remember what it is.
And so Andrew, to yourself, so cybersecurity is all about risk management and the kind of cyber risks that are out there. What risks exist at the moment for SMEs? What things should we be particularly worried about?
Okay, so in terms of risks facing SMEs, SMBs, first of all, everyone is a target. So every business has the opportunity to be extorted. That's all criminals are looking for. They're looking to take money from those who have it. And organisations, whether that's businesses, charities, whatever, they have the opportunity to be extorted. So sometimes I think people can look on, we see the news and look at Jaguar, Land Rover or Marks and Spencer's and think, we're not a target. They are. That's a big part of why I come to events like that and talk at events and talk to yourself. I need to get business leaders and owners to understand that they are a target and they need to take it seriously. In terms of the biggest things that they need to, I guess, worry about, you can put a lot of layers around security. But the important one, or the thing where it starts to go wrong, is through phishing. So people sending emails pretending to be...
And we're talking about the technical definition of phishing, not taking a weekend at your nearest lake.
I'd love to take a weekend at the nearest lake, but I'm definitely talking about the technical stuff. So it's ultimately a criminal sending an email to a company's employees, trying to pretend that they're to be someone that they're not, and ultimately trying to get that employee to click on a link and then enter some credentials and take it from there. There was I prepared for this podcast, you're about to tell. There was a study done by the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, and it was released, I think it's the 30th of April, so not too long ago. And they said that of all the attacks that occur and affect businesses across the UK, 85% of them started through phishing. So that's the big one. There's other things that criminals can take advantage of and leverage, but you need to lock down the phishing to begin with.
It's a bit. I guess you have to kind of, I don't know, give people a bit of slack, because they're getting ever more clever, aren't they? They're getting more and more sneaky. They're making things look more and more genuine.
Yeah.
Whereas I've always, think before you click, and don't. In fact, I never actually ever click on a link within an email at all. I always go to the site when I'm accessing it. But I guess clicking on links within an email is one mistake. Richard, what other kind of common mistakes do businesses and indeed users make?
Well, where do we start?
Where do we start? Yeah.
Okay. Assuming then that the five technical controls are in place, and that means something called Cyber Essentials, which I'm happy to talk about later, then certainly there's phishing, but it's not just phishing. There are other, you may have heard of or may not have heard of, vishing. Vishing, yes. So that's the way that the social engineer, as they're called, gets into the confidence of a person by talking to them, and gets them to give away all sorts of information that they otherwise wouldn't do. So there's vishing. There are other... it's psychology. It's about deception, it has to be said. Getting people to do things they wouldn't normally do, say things that they wouldn't normally say, and it's fraud. Now, the most important thing is to recognise that someone's trying to defraud you in some way. Usually, often, money's involved. And to know what to do about it. Even if you put the phone down, even if you think, I can see what that is on the website, you need to report it. And the police want to know. The police have had a line going since 2012 to basically sort of pick up cyber frauds. It's absolutely huge. The problem actually is the police don't have the resources to be able to deal with all of the reports that come into them, and so it gets passed on to people locally. But unless people recognise it, then report it, and we all say, now let's do something about it, then that problem particularly isn't going to go away, because it's psychology.
Yeah.
It's abnormal psychology, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you're talking about targeting individuals. The same rules happen to targeting, or the same approach happens to targeting businesses. Mm-hmm. You might think you've got an innocent phone call from your technical support department, which we get. We don't actually have a technical support department, and you throw that at them, and it's like, But with regards to actually setting forward some practical steps for your business, or indeed as an individual, with regards to cybersecurity, are there any things that you could perhaps do to improve security immediately, Andrew, to kind of really get it at least started?
There's loads of things. Going back to phishing and talking about that, that's the thing that you need to try and protect about, because that's where the most common attacks occur. Someone gets access to your environment through a user's account, and it can start to go wrong if you don't have the security in place. So staff training is really important. Like you touched earlier, how do you know what's a genuine email and how do you know what isn't? With the advent of AI, you're getting a lot more sophisticated emails and attacks than there has ever been before. They're much more sophisticated, and there's a huge amount of them, and they're being fired all the time. So helping your staff understand what is a genuine email and what potentially isn't, and actually what to do and who to ask if they're unsure, that's a really important part. But on top of that, there are so many more things that you can look at. So at Nexus, we bring customers on board to our support and to help out with to work with them, and we look under the hood of a new organisation, see what they've got. We find organisations that don't have multi-factor authentication. So that's when, if you try to log in, you put your username in, you put your password in, and then you get a prompt on your phone. If you don't get that prompt on your phone, that you're just trying to you're relying on a username and a password, and we all know passwords,
which people are really bad at actually setting complex passwords.
Exactly. So they can be hacked really quickly. So it's imperative these days to get multi-factor authentication. Well, MFA.
I've been having problems with digital all morning.
Digital. Well, you're in the wrong place for that.
I know. I was thinking that. Yeah.
Just on top of that, I think there's other services as well. There's something called conditional access. So I work for Nexus. We're a very security IT or an IT security focused company. We're the custodians of huge amounts of organisations' data. And for example, if I try to log in from France without telling my IT staff or IT team, I wouldn't be able to log in because it's I'm trying to log in from an area outside of the UK. If I try to log into
because an alarm goes off in the holiday in the office saying illegal holiday.
Well, I've got to take a holiday first.
I guess, yeah.
But so you can put controls over how people are allowed to access their data. If I try to log in on a non-Nexus phone or non-Nexus PC, it won't let me log in as well.
So this is almost kind of like at hardware level, and I guess at IP address, at IP access level.
It's hardware level.
If you're not in the right place or not using the right device, you're not coming in.
And these are the basic controls. You can also, so that's something called conditional access, and you can go down a right rabbit warren of, all these changes that you can make to protect your data and rules that are put in place. And sometimes introduce those rules, they're powerful, but you've got to think about the business culture. You've got to get people to remember if they're going abroad and they want to work, they've got to let somebody know so you can make the change. But on top of that, it's about reviewing what your IT posture is and what IT controls you have. So I started at Nexus about eight and a half years ago. And at the time we were selling antivirus to clients, and that's fine. That's antivirus is important. But over that time, that's changed, and you can get services called EDR. And antivirus is a software that looks for known bits of bad software on machines. EDR is I want to say new. It's not new. It's been around for a while, but it's a software that looks for patterns of behaviour. So the hackers that will try to get onto your devices or all the viewers' devices, they'll be using the same type of software that we use at Nexus, but it's not a virus. It's just professional software. But EDR looks for patterns of behaviour, and if they see someone's connected up to your machine and they're in France and you don't normally go to France, and then they elevate your permissions to that of administrator, and all of these things that happen, it will flag and realise and then put enough of them together and take an action. But a lot of organisations don't know or see the value in EDR because they don't think they're a target. And there's multiple other things that you can do, but from a basic, that's the first things that you should be looking at, I think.
This leads me on to bring in Richard, actually, and also the topic that you teased on earlier, which is cyber essentials, because I guess knowledge of all these sorts of things comes under your cyber essentials umbrella. So can you go in a bit of detail about that and what that involves for those businesses who perhaps have heard about it but haven't explored it?
Yeah, with greatest of pleasure. It's one thing in recent years that the UK, actually the UK government has done really well. Because there are three types of controls that are needed. There's the technical ones, which the five I've mentioned. There's also the user controls, which we talked about, phishing and so on. And there's also the management controls. And so that's somewhere between. Sometimes the technical controls aren't possible, so management needs to impose those controls on the users. So make that clear. What the government, it's actually GCHQ, so Cheltenham, Boffins and so on, chose they can go through all of these, or they can try to automate as much as possible and deal with the humans later on. Yeah. So what technical controls can we focus on all the machines that are being used and all the other devices that are being used by small businesses, and say, do this, 5 of them, and 80% of hacking attempts will fail. And that was actually, that's been borne out. There have now been about 300,000 cyber essentials certificates, so the statistics are pretty solid about that now. Yes?
I was going to ask a question, because so in the in that annual survey that I referenced earlier, they talk a lot about stats and the state of the nation, and they've said that the volume of cyber essentials certified organisations went from 3% to 5%. And I think that's horrendous. I think that organisations across the UK need to treat security...
Hang on, roll back on that. You're talking about the impact of the number of businesses that have actually taken this on and completed it.
So if you've got, I don't know, 1,000 organisations across the UK, all of it, more than 1,000, wherever it is, only 5% have achieved Cyber Essentials as a certification. And that's not plus, that's Cyber Essentials.
It's actually less than that. But
it's a
we've
very awful number.
We've got to face the reality as it is now. So I spent, before I set up Regola, I worked as an academic, and I spoke to small businesses in that capacity, and the biggest problem was that they after you've spoken to them, we need Cyber Essentials, we need to do something technical, which we can see we can do, but we don't really we got other priorities that need to come first. We'll come back next month. We'll come back in 3 months, and of course, I'm quite new in sales, so I'm not used to sort of going back to people and saying again and again, but I'm learning, and it's actually in everybody's interest to go back to them and say, how about it this time?
Especially if you're a micro business, because the pressures that we all have with regards to, for example, actual service and product delivery to our clients is our number one, and then keeping the books balanced and keeping your business above water is probably number two. Anything that kind of is the curveball, the thing you're not used to dealing with, we by very nature we put it off, don't we?
Yeah, right. The one, a new approach, or not actually that new, but a relatively recent approach by the main organisation behind Cyber Essentials, NCSC, and a company called IASME, is to actually use insurance, because any business that wants cyber insurance, they'll be asked to fill a form in, and they'll be asked all sorts of questions they didn't expect to be asked, and they realise, I don't actually know the answer to this question. And insurance forms, as we all know, when we sort of get our cars insured, there's some questions I'm not quite sure about that. But that sort of, if you've done it online, you're told at the start if you get anything wrong, you could be in trouble. So, and it's the same really with getting cyber insurance. If you are one politician called once economical with the truth on the form, it's not in your interest, put it like that. Now, insurance requires a form, Cyber Essentials requires a form, so as well as going through the pain of doing that to get insurance, they could go through the pain and get Cyber Essentials. And what a lot of businesses don't realise, once they've got Cyber Essentials, they're less of a risk. So actually, in terms of insurance, they'll get potentially lower premiums. In fact, so much so that UK insurers, because remember this is just a UK thing, UK insurers will give them up to 25,000 of cyber liability insurance just because they've got Cyber Essentials.
Just, Richard, what's interesting with Cyber Essentials, and we see it a bit, is there's Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. So it's two elements to it.
What's the difference?
Well, so Cyber Essentials is self-certified. So you fill in a form, you get your IT team or whoever it is to fill it in, and you self-certify it. Cyber Essentials Plus is when you get an external auditor to come in and mark your homework. Now, I'm sure, Rich, you can talk about it in terms of what the difference it makes. From a practical perspective, we see clients that will come to us and say, yep, we're Cyber Essentials, our IT team have filled this in, or the people who looked after IT or helped us with IT have filled this in, and we're like, brilliant. And then again, we look under the hood and we see that they're running Windows 10 machines which went end of life, or they've got Windows servers, or they've got no patch management pro. They've got all these holes in the self-certified the self-certified controls.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between the two. And
Of course, if then they were hacked, and they went, we've got Cyber Essentials, we've got cyber liability insurance, the first thing they would say, hey, you've got Windows 10 computers. No chance. In fact, you've been deceiving your users, so they get into real trouble about it.
Yeah. This is really interesting. I love the fact that you're actually getting into a debate over this topic. This is quite.
Well, no, we're both sitting on the same.
You also, yeah, but it's kind of like it's just putting it forward to the business about how important it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, you mentioned, and I'm actually quite intrigued by that. You can, as an organisation, self-certify.
Yep.
That process is going to make you raise questions, or it should make you raise questions, and should make you look at your processes, though, as a business, shouldn't it?
It should. And I think it depends on what's driving the reasons for the certification. Do you need it for cyber insurance? Do you need it because you need a tender for certain work and things like that? And sometimes you get a business need to tender for work, so it can become look, just get Cyber Essentials and we'll deal with it at a later date. Or maybe you had it in the past and all of a sudden you get someone like Nexus involved and we're like, well, you don't have the right controls in place. You shouldn't really have it. So when it comes to renewal, you've got to decide what you do, because your customers are going to see it come off the website. So there's lots of business or conflicting business objectives.
Hang on, Richard, let him finish.
Okay, all right.
Carry on.
No, but
You see him waving over there. It's like, yeah, carry on, Andrew.
no, I think it's all with IT and with cyber specifically. It boils, for me, you said it right at the beginning, it boils down to risk. And it's managing risk. And you can throw as much money as you want at IT solutions and security solutions. And all it does is mitigates threats to a certain degree. You're never going to get any, whether it's, Threat Locker, whether it's CrowdStrike, whatever. There's no solution in there that's going to say you are 100% risk-free.
Yeah.
It's all about mitigation. And, how you invest that money is down to what the board or the people in the business want to do and how they want to invest it and how much risk they want to take on. At Nexus, we help organise, or we help customers work towards Cyber Essentials, because we think that's the aim for organisations. That's the minimum. Once you've got that, once you've got that and Cyber Essentials Plus, you should be at the same standard. Once you've got that, maybe it's cyber assurance, then maybe it's ISO 27001, whatever it is that you need to do.
On, you can probably go. Yeah,
exactly. But you want to work with them and provide a roadmap, but ultimately it boils down to the business leader to decide where they want to go and what advice they want to take, and do they want to take our advice and that invest the money or not. But there's a consequence if they don't.
Richard, what would you like to add?
Sorry, Richard.
Well, self-certification.
Just for those who are watching, by the way, these two are going to go out for a pint afterwards and going to carry on.
Yeah, self-certification implies that you fill a form in and you automatically get the certification. What actually happens with Cyber Essentials is that they then go off to be marked by a very highly qualified, and I know that because I had to go through the process, cyber assessor for Cyber Essentials, and it's certainly not self-certified. I think there was only a 75% pass rate for the first few years for Cyber Essentials. It's probably sort of higher now because more and more businesses are getting wiser about it, and they're getting wiser about what they need to do. But let's take, for example, updates. Yes, a business can say, we've updated this, we've updated that. Then there'll be a question saying, well, what's your latest version? And they'll presumably go onto their computers and pick the version off the computer and put it in there. And the assessor is possessed with all the latest statistics and can see that they've got out-of-date software. And then, of course, it has to be justified. They don't pass it. That they need to get everything, they need to get all their ducks in a row, to use the phrase, before they will get that certification and that insurance.
I guess the point I was trying to make is you're relying on them putting the correct information in, and not, if they've got Windows 10 machines over here, let's just forget about those for the moment, and let's just say we're all using Windows 11 and the appropriate versions. You don't go into their environment and say, what's that over there? That's a Windows 10 machine. It's just you can only mark what's available on the form that's provided to you for the.
Yeah, to some extent, but as I say, it's refined over the years. Cyber Essentials started in 2014. We're now 12 years in.
Just so everyone knows,
and every year.
Bear with us, that's the voice of God.
Starting momentarily.
Well, that was Richard.
Thank you.
I don't know if that was Kelly or Claire. The previous voice call was definitely Kelly, but I think that one's got a bit more reverb behind it. And let's move away from Cyber Essentials and talk about something perhaps when you're running a business and you've got that, oops, it's kind of gone a bit whoopsie moment. What happens when something goes wrong? What are your steps? We should all be aware. We should all have a process, I guess, in play. And certainly you should do when it comes to information management. If you've got a data leak or you need to answer some questions to the Information Commissioner's Office, you should know what to do. But how should you respond when something goes wrong in general?
So I think the first thing is they should know what to do. There's exercises you can do that put that into practice. So, for example, if an organisation that we work with, they found all of a sudden that they came in and they had a warning sign on their machines that says, right, everything's been locked, you're a victim of a ransomware attack, they'll need to phone Nexus. But how do they know what the number is? Where are they going to get that from? It's not on their computer anymore. How do they email me or my colleagues to help? So they need to make sure they've got a little document or something put away which is separate, which tells them who to contact. But ultimately, when something goes wrong, they need to phone their IT supplier, whoever looks after their IT, give them a call straight away. Ultimately, get the professionals involved. And you might phone them up and they, depending on the environment, they might say, switch everything off. It depends on
isolation.
What's gone wrong. Yeah, it depends on what's going on. If someone phones up and says, I think my account's been hacked, you don't want them to unplug every single server. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But do you want to take that drastic step straight away? You need to talk to an IT provider, explain what's happened, and they can help you understand what steps to take.
Richard, the maybe you do, maybe you don't comes down to having a plan, doesn't it?
Well, no, you actually raised a very important point about the relationship between the business and the IT provider, because I think businesses expect too much from their IT providers. They are IT providers, not cybersecurity providers, and cybersecurity isn't sort of part of standard IT. So that they should work as a partnership. Certainly we find with Cyber Essentials, you can almost tell straight away if the business is working with an IT provider productively or not, because the way the form's presented, it's not possible for the IT provider to do everything themselves, because the business has to sign it off. Someone senior in the business has to sign the thing off.
Yeah, and I guess also there's a situation whereby you can't be in every single office of every single client that you've got all the time. There's an education involved. There's making sure the users know what to do in terms of what to look out for. Also the processes.
There's two different sections. I think there's the preventative piece, which is saying what happens if, and staff training and education. But when it all goes wrong and it all hits the fan, then you need to know what to do and who to speak to. And you're right, some IT providers cannot do that. Some people can do it, and make sure you've got a plan in place. And Nexus, we've been involved in what would have been business-ending ransomware events for a range of organisations across the years. I've been speaking to a managing director. In one instance, I spoke to a managing director at 9 o'clock in the morning and explained what was going on and what it all meant. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, he was on the phone to me asking if he still had a business, and I had to tell him, I don't know. We don't know. We need to, we needed to find out what was going on with their backups and take it from there. But you're right. It's at Nexus, we've got a huge amount of capability, but we partner as well with a company called CSA Cyber. So when a company needs to do data forensics, because they might want to know how the attack occurred and where it went wrong and what the entry point is, we'll liaise with a third party, one of our partners, to do that work. Now, not every organisation will want to do that, because they might need to be up and running and trading in 24 hours. And, we've accomplished that for some we've accomplished that for organisations, but there's different pressures on different, scale.
And also every situation is different.
Of course it is, yeah.
So many variables.
Yeah, and I always talk about the worst. I've dealt with organisations that have been ransomware, which is one of the most stressful things that our engineers, I have to deal with. It's that's the business ending stuff. But again, obviously, that's not the full scale of a cyber incident. It can be an account was hacked. If a marketing department has a LinkedIn account which gets accessed by somebody external, it's not ideal for them, but it's limited to LinkedIn. That's problems. It may be that there's customer data, they have to report it. We'll work with them. But you're just going back to what you said earlier. You're quite right. When there's a incident, and no matter what the scale is, it's really important that it remains the company's incident. They're the ones who's in charge. They're the ones who make the decisions. There's going to be investment that's required to remediate. Probably you need to buy new services or security services. You fix what caused the problem in the first place. That we at Nexus, we can only recommend. And I think any IT provider that finds themselves in that position, they can only recommend and say, right, this is what we think you should be doing, and help them with that. But ultimately, it's the customers, it's that organisation's incident, and they need to be the ones in control.
See, I knew this was going to be a complex topic. As soon as I saw it on the running order, I thought, crumbs, because this means the answers are so different. The questions that are being asked and the answers to the questions are truly unique for every single organisation, which is why it's important to reach out to professionals. And you'll find the firm that fits for you, I think is fair to say. In this, you've got a whole myriad of options ahead of you. Events like this, Digital Devon, are all about educating. So very, very quickly, in 60 seconds, because we need to bring this segment to a close. Gentlemen, how would you recap and what would your takeaways be? And what do you think about the event? Richard, let's quickly ask you.
Okay, yeah, it's been a long journey, and just to recap, only 1% out of 100% is pretty poor. Cyber Essentials is brilliant. Why aren't businesses using it? Same reason people didn't use seatbelts for many years after they were available. It wasn't the law. People, in the end, only do things when the law's passed. The law will be passed, hopefully, in the next 2 or 3 months, and we'll see what happens then.
Andrew?
Yeah, so I think this is a really great event. I think any opportunity to go and talk to local businesses about IT and help them, because they're not always going to be the experts. You've got experts here, whether it's ourselves or people around us. They can help them. In terms of takeaways, I think it's really important that a organisation speak to whoever looks after the IT and ask them what's going on, what do they recommend. So get an idea of what the state of the nation is right then for them. And then secondly, I think go to a third party, do penetration tests, they're a lot cheaper than what they used to be. That, if you speak to your IT provider or your IT partner, they will be able to tell you what the known issues are. Do a penetration test, will be able to highlight that blind spot. So what they don't know and what you don't know, that will show, right, there's a problem over here, which you can give to the partner and they can remediate.
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. Good tips. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Cyber Essentials, my word. What a hot topic. So coming up, we're going to be talking about what next. What's next? What next? Went a bit Jana then, didn't I? The future of digital and AI in the Southwest. Thank you for joining us here live from Digital Devon Live at the Riviera International Centre in Torquay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.